liberty and justice for all.
Right, Bonnie, roll call, please.
McAllister,
Here.
Flynn,
Here.
Walter,
Here.
Spence,
Here.
Henschel,
I am here.
Nelson, Andrews,
Here.
Morris,
Here.
Seifert.
Thank you, Bonnie. And first public comment, would you read the rules, please?
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners which is required to be open to the public under the provisions of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board may state his or her name and township or district. Providing a specific address is not recommended. Persons may address the board on matters or issues which are relevant and germane to county government as determined by the chairperson. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions, if any. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. The chairperson may, at his or her discretion, allow an additional opportunity or time to speak if determined germane and necessary to the discussion. Public comment will be solicited during the 2 public comment periods noted in Rule 5.4, Order of Business. However, public comment may be received during the meeting when a specific agenda topic is scheduled for discussion by the board. Prior to the first public comment, the chairperson will indicate the topics on the agenda for which public comment will be accepted. Members of the public wishing to comment should raise their hand or pass a note to the clerk in order to be recognized and shall not address the board until called upon by the chairperson. The board shall not comment or respond to a person who is addressing the board. Silence or non-response from the board should not be interpreted as disinterest or disagreement by the board. Please be respectful and refrain from personal or political attacks.
Thank you. My apologies, everyone, for being late. Anybody who'd like to approach the podium at this time, please do so. Just walk right up there, miss. And anyone else that would like to speak?
Commissioner?
I don't know if this is work. It's a rough week. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Talbot. I am a resident of the Oakwood Triangle neighborhood. I've been a lifelong resident of Traverse City. I have been very involved with the City of Traverse City, being a part of the board that started the Young Professionals at the Chamber of Commerce, on the board that started Impact 100, that's given millions in nonprofit money. Now I'm mostly focused on my 2 kids and raising them in the City of Traverse City. So I wanted to make some comment on the presentation you're about to see about the airport. And it's a great presentation. I've looked at it. You guys did a great job. I love our airport. I personally use it at least 6 times for both business and pleasure a year. So I love having that convenience in Traverse City. So I wanted to start there. But I am here to make comments opposing the $71 million bond proposal from the county. First, I would ask you to pay very close attention to the numbers that you're about to see on the growth of the airport and with the growth that we've experienced and the growth that we're expected to continue to experience, right? Which is a good thing for our community. I want to do a back maybe a little history lesson. 20 years ago, I remember when we built the new terminal, there was talk about moving the airport south of town. And at that point, a lot of the businessmen in town said, well, we need the convenience of having the airport here. And that made sense 20 years ago, right? We had 3, I guess we had what? It was Northwest at the time. We had just regional jets, right? Going back and forth to mostly Chicago and Detroit. So that made sense. No one could have predicted, right, the growth that we've experienced. It was kind of like this for a while, and then it kind of shot up, right? So now we've got a lot of, we've got maybe too much, right? Airport traffic this close to the city. And the reason that I'm saying that is mostly because of the trees that we're cutting down in our city. I want you to really think about what makes our town feel like up north, right? And a lot of that has to do with our trees. I have been alerted to the airport wanting to cut down 80 trees in the Oakwood Cemetery. That's a 165-year-old park in our city center. That's just the beginning, guys. Like, that's not going to stop, right? Like, when you see these growth numbers, you're going to realize that these 80 trees in Oakwood, our Boone Street neighborhoods, all of these trees that are being leveled, this is just the beginning, right? So the other point I wanted to make was noise pollution in our city, right? I was on a Zoom call the other day, and I actually had to stop the Zoom call because the jet noise from the airport in my neighborhood was so loud the participants couldn't hear me, right? And that's just the beginning of that as well. So I would like for you all to, the other point I wanted to make was that when you look at our master plans for the city and the county, the airport did not rank high on our residents' list of priorities, right? What was the #1 priority? Affordable housing. So I'd ask you to imagine, instead of building more onto the current airport,
Mr. Chairman, the time's elapsed.
I'm aware. I'll allow it. You have 3 minutes. Your 3 minutes is up. Please wrap up.
Thank you. Imagine if we could move the airport south of town like we had originally talked about 20 years ago, sell that land to a developer in order to build subdivisions. That would alleviate a lot of the housing crisis that we're facing, and it would save you guys, think about all the airports you fly into. They are decimated, right? There's not a single, you don't want our town to look like every single airport that you guys fly into. So if we moved it south of town, we could have the area to expand the airport to what we need it to be, and also build workforce housing closer to town. I think it's a win for everyone, right? So I would just ask you to consider, instead of giving this bond to build it where it is, let's look long-term, and let's see if there's other solutions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tom Berklint, and I'm a resident of Traverse City. I live in the Oakwood Triangle Neighborhood Association, which is the largest neighborhood association in Traverse City now. Our neighborhood adjoins the Oakwood Cemetery along 8th Street. I have read the local paper that the volume of the air traffic has doubled within the past 10 years at this airport. This airport is inside the city limits. Have any of you thought of discussing holding off on this expansion and doing a study with TVC to begin looking for a large acreage parcel outside the city where a new airport can be built for future expansion? If the population of the city is supposed to continue to grow and hence more air traffic, wouldn't it be best to move TVC outside the city of Traverse City, away from residential neighborhoods? I personally don't want the increased noise pollution, air pollution, additional traffic this brings, and also added risk of an aircraft coming down in the city with all this increased traffic. People come to Traverse City for the quality of life it offers. I don't see this expansion with increased air traffic as enhancing the quality of my life and my neighborhood and the city, and many of my neighbors feel the same way. Also, I'm not sure if any of you are aware of that TVC would like to remove approximately 70 to 80 old growth trees in the Oakwood Cemetery, which would completely ruin the character of this beautiful park right in the city that many people enjoy walking through on a year-round basis, including myself. This is a beautiful canopy of trees, some of which are over 200 years old and very healthy, that make it a very peaceful place right in our city to go for a quiet walk and relax and unwind. The city of Traverse City got its name Tree City, USA, in large part because of this beautiful park with the large trees in it. I heard the TVC will replace the trees that it removes with smaller trees that won't grow as tall, which will ruin the whole character of the park and allow aircraft to come in at a lower altitude over our homes. The cemetery park was here long before the automobile and the airplane, and I am sure that Perry Hanna, who donated the property for a cemetery park, would not like to see it decimated with the removal of all these trees. I'm sure many of the residents of TVC would also not like to see the removal of any of these trees as well. TVC removed all the trees in the residential yards along Boone Street and the mobile home park along Barlow some years back, and it ruined the character of these neighborhoods. Is this what you want to see happen to the residential neighborhoods of this city? I think you really need to think about what I have mentioned here before you agree to support expansion of this airport, and talk with TVC about looking for land outside the city for a larger airport that can continue to grow as the area grows and not ruin our city. And this is the reason why visitors come here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners and staff. Ron Lemkool, Long Lake Township. My wife and I own Cherry Country Cafe and Gift Shop in the airport. We started back in the airport back in 2012. There were 10 employees. Right now we have 43. So we've watched the growth, been part of the growth, and dealt with the growth as we peak during June and July and August and September, and then it settles back down. But we recently signed a 20-year lease for the airport, and our goal is to continue growing there and watching it continue to grow. And I highly encourage you to support the growth of the airport. As some of you have been there and seen some of the pictures in that July and August time, they need to have the additional areas. But what we're also concerned is if you don't back this bond with your full faith and credit, that could add extra money to the airport's bond that they would have to get themselves of $16 million. And then that cost could be added to our rents. So that could cost us where we would have to reduce pay or maybe less staff as we go through this process. So we highly encourage you, as Cindy and I, goal is to continue to grow our business here in Traverse City and continue to hire staff. We ask you to support that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak, public comment? Going once, going twice, third time's a charm. Thank you, everyone. Moving right along. The approval agenda. Take a motion.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Henschel, second by Commissioner McAllister. Approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to 5A.
Good morning, Commissioners. We have Kevin Klein and his team from the airport to present to you updates for the bonding discussion. I also want to draw to your attention that we also have in-house with us today our bond counsel, Roger Swetz, and financial advisor, Stephen Burke. They're just behind the screen. They're here, though. Mr. Klein.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. I appreciate you welcoming us back from the March study session. As promised, we asked to return in November, and here we are. We've had a great, I would say, many public input sessions on this project throughout the last year, and they've really turned out well to produce a very positive feeling towards the airport in the addition. So we're here to request, as we've talked about, the full faith and credit on the bonds to support the project. Our outline today, we're going to touch on the vision and the request, our gates to the future, why it's important, the estimated project cost, the financial plan that's been updated from the questions that we received in the March meeting, and really hit the financial plan and how it will impact the county's credit. And then overall, the final ordinance, and discuss the bond protections that would be in the ordinance. So along with me today is my team, Team TVC. So who will be speaking with us is Christina Woodward from Recondo and Associates, Sean Wall from PFM, Pat McGowan with our attorney, bond counsel. The support, we have our engineer, Bob Nelson, our CFO, Mark Bishop, and most importantly, our chair, Steve Pomondon. Back row, we have Dan Saul, our COO, our airport counsel, Carrie Zeitz. So any question that you may have, feel free to stop me. If I can't answer it, one of our team will be happy to do that. As discussed, we respectfully request to have the full faith and credit based on the $71 million. As we've discussed in multiple meetings since October of 2024, that number has stayed the same. We're looking at a $120 million construction project for the terminal addition. $60 million of that will be supported through federal funding, through our grants, various programs, and we'll discuss that as we go forward. The other $60 million will be, we're looking for is through a bond program with finance costs of approximately $11 million on those bonds to make the $71 million. The full faith and credit is being asked to really allow the project to proceed, to be able to sign contracts, the execution of the construction contracts, and to have compliance with the FAA for those grant dollars. We've talked about, as when we left the March meeting, what other opportunities could the airport pursue other than complete bond and full faith and credit with the county. One of those programs that came forward was from the Build America Bureau in the TIFIA program. We have looked at this program extensively. This is a federal loan program that is typically a little bit better than half on the interest rate of the federal interest rate that you would see on bonds. However, there's a formula to apply that in the square footage of the building to use those particular dollars. And right now, the most that we'd be eligible for is about $28 to $30 million. So we are pursuing that. We have submitted applications for that. That would be entered into the fiscal year of 2027. With that said, so then we want to continue to proceed with the $71 million full faith and credit ask, with, as we discussed in the previous, splitting that bond issue at about $40 million to begin and kick off the project, and then to see if TIFIA can come through in that 2027 timeframe to continue to pursue those types of bonds. So, why TVC Gates to the future? We've talked about the increased need in the footprint and the number of gates to accommodate, and I want to say, remember, it's the current passengers using the facility. The FAA does not allow us to plan and build additional gates and additional capacity for what might be forecasted, projected. This is for the current. It will modernize our waiting areas. It'll improve our security checkpoints. It'll help our workforce. It'll enhance ADA compliance and design, sustainability, and improve the overall operational facility. And create passenger amenities, food options, as you heard from the Lemcools, opportunities to increase that, to really make our airport world-class as we go forward. When we look at the overcrowding, there's a quick picture in there as we look at that. That is a typical day throughout the summer. We fight for every square inch of the building to be utilized at our facility. So this will really relieve those overcrowding. The current design, where we're at in the process right now, we've completed 90% design. And really, we focused on, our main focus has been on the local traveler in upgrading those amenities that the local traveler has asked for. We did surveys through our public hearing. We have done, and lots of feedback sessions, and we have hundreds of information of feedback that has encouraged us to add features to the building that recognize Northern Michigan. So the theme that we're looking at is really, not only are we carrying our river theme that is in the current concourse, but we're looking at adding the dunes, Sleeping Bear Dunes features, and others to really highlight what Northern Michigan is all about. Last year, in 2024, we saw a record of 787,114 passengers. We are already up this year 24% on that number. The terminal was built for half that amount. So we're still, as we continue to fight for those square inches, we've worked with our airlines to adjust schedules, to balance out the day, to try to reduce that impact so the throughput of the building can be managed. This summer, many of this team has been on all hands on deck, whether it was moving bags through the system, helping people guide through the terminal, or even driving buses to relieve the gate congestion out on the field. The model that you're seeing today includes the capital cost for parking. It's been updated to include the capital cost for parking growth that was mentioned in the March meeting, and other airport projects that were brought up, non-aeronautical funding, so we'll address all of those throughout our modeling today. One of the questions that Commissioner Nelson, or Commissioner Henschel raised in the March meeting, and I went to the USDOT to get the numbers, is he asked, where are the local travelers coming from? How close, where is the centric of that? And that center is Grand Traverse County. Specifically, Old Mission Peninsula, down in through the city areas. We see approximately 175,000 of those 787,000 passengers come from within 10 miles of the airport. Do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, our population, right, on Old Mission Peninsula is 6,000 people. How can you break that down for us? How do you measure that?
Well, as stated earlier, that people travel 6 to 10 times.
Sure, but
And
that
so
would be
that
10 trips per day for every person. on
that
Old
would
Mission.
no that
Per
that
year,
so,
sorry.
yeah, and we're seeing that's what we're seeing from the local
Can you
traveler.
tell me how that data is compiled? I saw
That's
that
from the
it's-
USDOT data.
thought
that-
it's Placer AI.
Yeah, no, that's USDOT. Placer AI is the source that gathers that data so we can look at it specifically where it's purchased.
Just help us understand it.
Sure, sure. So what that does is when you purchase a ticket, you record your address. That information is given to the DOT. And then what Placer AI goes after is gathers that and compiles that data and puts it together. So it's from a point of sale standpoint.
Thank you.
So with that, then, we look at another 100,000 come from within 25 miles and another 100 come from within 50 miles. So when we look at that, that is intense in and around the airport that is being utilized. These are our customers that we call local. So why is this important? It's a community investment. As the community grows and uses the airport, our businesses, our residents grow. TVC contributes over $1 billion to the local economy each year. That was measured in 2017. The airport makes the region more attractive to businesses by improving accessibility. Companies are more likely to establish operations, and where executives and employees can travel conveniently. The airport creates direct employment opportunities for pilots, ground staff, air traffic controllers, security personnel, maintenance crews, our cafe and concessions, and we indirectly, the airport supports jobs through tourism, hospitality, and retail industries. Most importantly, when we look at partnership with the county and we talk about how bond ratings are given, the success of the airport also directly influences your bond rating. The economy that supports the economic development that the airports support is well looked at the bond rating agencies. So we look at that as a partnership between the airport and the county to build upon that relationship as we go forward. So as we kick off, cost to be financed. I'll turn it over to Christina and Sean.
Thank you. Many of you may remember me from earlier this year. I'm Christina Woodward, Senior Vice President with Recondo and Associates, and we're an airport consulting firm that looks at airports across the U.S. and internationally for development, problem solving, and then I specifically focus on financial projections and bond issuances. So, as Kevin mentioned, the chart here shows the project that's the subject of the bond issuance, and so this is the capital project for the terminal, $120 million. There's the line items that make out the different projects there in 26 and 27, and then the funding sources that are shown on the columns on the right. So of the estimated cost, approximately $59 million will be funded with bond proceeds. That falls within the $71 million for the bonds, and then takes into account things like capitalized interest. And then there's the matching funds that go along with various grant funding, and there'll be local funds that we'll touch on for the component that's coming out of, say, the airline rate base and being generated by revenue from the airport. So as we went through this exercise, we also started to layer in There more capital projects that are outside of this program, just to see how it all plays together in the financial forecast. So in addition to what you see there, there's approximately $58 million of additional capital projects through the projection of 2034. Some of these are simply placeholders just to try and stress test the numbers, but that's something that's been layered in. So as I mentioned,
Can you just
Yes.
identify what you mean by matching funds?
sure, so that's, a lot of that is state grant funds.
So matching is also includes grant funding?
That's the state.
So there's state and local.
Oh, so when the federal government issues the grant funding, there is a requirement to have matching funds that go along with it. So for example, if a grant is issued, 75% of the project will be paid with the grant. There needs to be a local match of 25%. That's as an example, and so that accounts for that required matching fund.
And I guess my question is, what is the where do the matching funds come from? Is that the
Sure.
airport's revenue?
So in general, that's kind of the bottom line. So it flows through various different sources. There's a combination of passenger facility charge revenue, which can be counted as local funds. There's also what flows to the airline rate base. So it's not necessarily isolated. There's several different factors that are flowing through, and it's all captured into the revenues that are pledged to the bonds.
Maybe I can simplify it. On most grants, it's required through the state of Michigan, through our Channeling Act, and through the federal government. You use 75, I'll use 90 to make it easier. A lot of our grants come in at 90%. State of Michigan matches that through the Channeling Act with 5%. We match it through airport revenues at 5%.
I always appreciate a simple response. Thank you.
I've been accused of being in the weeds before, so please. Sorry. No, all good. Okay, does that answer? So here is that grant funding strategy. These are the grants that are assumed to fund the project. We have the AIP entitlements, and what that is FAA Airport Improvement Program. This is a federal program that invests in capital development at the airport. This is something that's been around for many years and has had support, and it's continued to have support even the recent years when the program has been approved at the federal level. There's also AIP discretionary funds. These are those that are for projects that are at the discretion of the FAA, but funded through the same approved dollars by the federal government in the same program. And then in the last several years, there's been the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that has both a component of discretionary and metric-based funding. So what you see here is the airport improvement grants component of it. That's the earned money based on activity. And then there is the potential for a discretionary grant through that program that the airport's pursuing that's not assumed in this analysis. And so that would come through the airport revenues as the alternative. And then finally, the state grants that are shown there. So the airport activity forecast, and I believe you have the updated slide here that was passed out before the presentation. A similar slide was included in the packet, but we've layered on some additional information. So the bars there, and I'll walk you through the lines. The bars are the actual activity in recent years with an estimated amount in 2025. So you can see that growth that has been happening recently. That real steep line is a trend line just from recent activity. We're not taking that out further in the financial projections just for sake of being conservative. We are using a combination of different sources to do the analysis. So when we met previously, we used a baseline that was based on the FAA's terminal area forecast. That's the FAA forecasts the nation's activity, and then this component is specifically their forecast for Traverse City. We also knew, based on, you can tell that forecast was coming in very low relative to current activity. We also ran some sensitivities you saw previously. So now what we have embedded is that green line, and that is the taking the FAA's long-term growth rate from their TAF and applying it immediately. So while forecasted activity for 2026 is likely higher than what we're seeing projected there, we're doing that just for conservative purposes. And that has a 1.7% annual growth rate applied from here, going from the estimated 25 amount and going forward. There may be higher activity, and so we've also run that looking at the FAA's preliminary TAF for 2025. They published that in August. They'll finalize it in January. We ran that as well just to see what the results look like, and so that's embedded there.
Can you help us understand how to reconcile this information about the forecast with Mr. Klein's statement earlier that we look at actual growth, we don't use projected usage for designing the airport? So,
Right.
So that green line is what the federal requirements would look at if we're not projecting.
So they use.
How do we,
Sure.
What I understand Mr. Klein to say was that we won't get federal funding. We can't design based on projected future use. We have to look at what actual current usage are. So why do how does this projection play into what we're trying to assess today?
So for our purposes on the financial analysis, it is using their forecast that it does not assume any type of incremental growth that would be affiliated with the project. So it's not a if you build it, they will come type of reliance on that type of activity. This is really the existing demand and then forecasted forward. Is that interpreting?
Yeah, and when you look at the terminal area forecast the FAA prepares, it's based on historical data. Similar to the way you would prepare your budget, you go back and you get historical data. They put the growth together, they put compound growth rates together, they look at their activity, and then for all airports in the overall aviation system, we'll say, then the FAA puts these forecasts out so they can plan for grant dollars, et cetera. So we're using their forecast to use that as a basis for in-plane passengers, costs, revenue, et cetera, to come in.
And that's the green line? That's the FAA line?
Okay. Is that
The green is-
pink on mine.
So if I can jump in, Bob Nelson, airport engineer, just to clarify, what Kevin was referring to with respect to capacity is for the design of the building. What we're talking about here is for the purposes of the cost modeling. So we're being very conservative on the cost modeling and sticking with FAA standards for the design.
Which is the base case, not the sensitivities?
Correct.
That's correct. So the green is what we're using as the base case in this analysis, and it's the green line there, and that is the preliminary 2025 TAF that was published in August that's finalized in January. So the activity drives a lot of the different revenue sources, one of the main ones being passenger facility charge revenue. This is that $4.50 fee on passenger tickets. This is the fee that's generates annual revenue. The airport can use it on a pay-go basis, a cash basis essentially for projects, or it can be used as a revenue source to pay off debt. And so what you see there is the forecasted PFC collections. And then we also have assumptions on projects inside that capital program we were talking about that is paid on a pay-go basis. Those are the orange bars. And then PFC revenues that are being applied to debt service. So this takes advantage of some of the collections that build up and then apply some of portions of that as well as the annual revenues to debt service. So this chart just gives the proportion for perspective of where the revenues are coming from that would be pledged to the bonds. The biggest pieces of the pie outside of some of that PFC revenue we were just looking at is the parking, terminal rents, and then rental car concessions revenue. And so these are some of the larger drivers, along with fuel sales, a lot of the in-terminal concessions. Those are what are being forecasted out in the form of either non-airline revenue or airline revenue. We'll get into some of those assumptions.
And if you could just help me understand, rent-a-car revenues are not included, or are they subsumed under one of the other pie peak colors? I saw in your 2024 annual report that was 20% of revenue, and it doesn't appear to be reflected here, so I'm just curious how it fits in.
Back concessions, rental car is RA.
RAC, thank you.
There is an additional revenue stream that comes from fees that the passengers pay for renting cars. That's not assumed here, and that would be set aside for other rental car related costs. Non-airline revenues. So these are the revenues that are not being collected through things like landing fees and terminal rents and terminal user fees paid by the airlines. A lot of these are driven by the activity at the airport. And so we've forecasted those on an individual basis, and it varies by component. And so as you can see, some things are being driven by inflation, simply an assumed revenue that will stay in lockstep with an inflation. And maybe there's inflation and a slight bump up just to also account for activity growth. On those major components that we were looking at, the automobile parking, we've tapered this down since we last met to try and bring that number into a bit more conservative aspect. And what that assumes is the passenger activity growth, but a haircut's taken off that. It's assuming 75% of that activity growth, and then an additional annual 4%. And what this is representing is increase to rates or potential additional demand that's accommodated. We did not assume any one-time bump-ups associated with any expansions, and we did layer in costs of parking projects into the pro forma. And then we also have the rental car activity. This is simply growing at unplanned passenger growth, no assumption on increased fees. All of these are just assumptions used for modeling, and there may be more realistic look at something like that where there would also be increased fees in addition to the activity growth. And then various other components like the rental income, concessions, and the fuel fees.
Is there a report that we could get a copy of? It looks like this is a November 2025 assessment. I mean, we can see the total numbers, but we can't see the breakdown. I assume behind the chart, there's some numbers, and that's information that could be shared with the board.
Yes, I assume so. So the 2025 chart that we were looking at before is on the estimated, it's around $15 million in total. And then there's projections that are in the airport's budget that we assumed. The actuals are coming in greater than those projections, but we use the assumptions that were lower in order to forecast. So the other big component is airline revenues. This is really driven by the space leased by the airlines in the terminal, as well as user fees and the landing fees for the aircraft landing on the airfield. So some of those are fixed because it's a square footage that's fixed now, and then there'll be a change in square footage as the terminal is expanded. And then others are variable, like the landing fees that vary by the weight of the aircraft that are coming in and the volume of activity. So one of the things that we mentioned in March is that we're going to look at the rate setting methodology to be able to assess what's there today and what might be there for the future. We've completed that exercise, and really what the goal was there to see how these comply with USDOT policies and what flexibility the airport would have with their rates going forward. So we've done that. We've been able to look at what that structure looks like. What you're seeing in the two pie charts is today's methodology and then a modernized methodology. Same revenue coming in, it's just being collected slightly differently. So instead of the sterile area fees, things like terminal rental rates, which are just a bit more standard today, in anticipation of discussions with the airlines.
Same question. Can we see the data supporting those charts as well? Thank you.
The airline revenues are then forecasted there. That's only the baseline scenario. It's not the higher sensitivity. And finally, operating expenses. So we have all the airport revenues that are coming in, you have the capital expenses, and then there's the operating expenses. And the operating expenses are paid prior to the debt service and the flow of funds. And so these are showing a projection of expenses that were assumed in the model. There's the growth varies by the type of expense, so salary and wages. compared to utilities, those are going to be grown anywhere between 3 and 5%. We did assume a bit of an increase in expenses associated with the terminal facility coming in line and expenses associated with that. And then the overall growth resulted in about 5.5% compounded annually. So those all net together to generate the airport. The total revenue that would be pledged to the bonds, and that would be covered when you look at the debt service, but these at least touch on the underlying assumptions. All in all, we were taking steps to bring this more conservative relative to what was shown in March by reducing non-airline revenue, increasing expenses, and layering additional capital projects.
Can you share how your projected growth ranges of 3 to 5% annually compared to recent growth in operating expenses over the last few years? What has been the growth rate in expenses recently? Is that based on historic? I mean,
Our historical's been 2.5 to 3%.
total year-over-year revenue growth? Yeah.
We tend to use budget, which tends to be higher and is in this case to forecast forward, and then we look at historical and layer on what we believe is something that could be looked at going forward so we don't underestimate. And that's based on experience at various airports by category.
And same question.
Yeah.
Can you provide the data for that? No. Thank you.
I'll pass that on to Sean from PFM.
Thank you all again. My name is Sean Wall from PFM Financial Advisors. We are the advisor, municipal advisor to the airport. So we're going to talk through a few different things today, mostly just an update, a more refined analysis from what we presented to you all back in March. From a plan of finance standpoint, we are still contemplating 2 series of bonds, with the first series being in 2026. You know, as you're well aware, that's expected to be a public market, tax-exempt AMT bond issuance. And then the second series, as Kevin talked about, is a little bit still in flux, but that is expected in 2027. And we're looking at 2 different financing options. So, you know, right now, as Kevin mentioned, we're looking at a Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act financing, or TIFIA, loan through the Federal Build America Bureau. There's plenty, as you can imagine, when you're working with the federal government, there's plenty of hurdles and hoops to jump through, but we're currently in the process of looking at that and evaluating that for the second series of bonds. Should that not come to fruition, you know, and our assumptions essentially are built here around the more conservative case of proceeding with a second series of public market tax-exempt AMT bonds in 2027. This is an updated bond sizing summary here. 2 kind of things are a dual mandate that we're really tracking here, highlighted in red. As you can see at the top, the construction fund deposit, or the bond proceeds for construction, are still tracking at just under $60 million, $59,729,823. Then you layer in the different financing costs and financing items associated with that fund. You know, establishing a capitalized interest fund, a debt service reserve fund, issuance costs, and then you know, using any bond premium to get us to tie to a total of just about $70.77 million, which then ties into our second mandate there of just under $71 million, not to exceed amount of par or principal amount of bonds. All in all, it's an estimated true interest cost of 4.73%. This is at current AMT market rates as of the end of October. The capitalized interest here is a little bit more, is a little shorter, assuming through July 1 of 2028. Still 30-year bond terms, and again, these do contemplate the funding of a debt service reserve fund, which is in the amount of about $5.5 million in the reserve fund across both series.
How do those interest rates compare to the TIFIA rates and also the length of repayment terms that may be applicable under the TIFIA loans?
Yeah, that's a great question. The TIFIA rate is the applicable Treasury rate plus, I believe, 1 basis point. So for something like this, you know, it would still be a 30-year, likely a 30-year financing with the TIFIA organization. So it's on a taxable basis. So you know, I think the last I looked, the 30-year Treasury was like 4.55. So it would be, let's say, 4.56. So certainly a lower interest rate, but you know, there are other, the issuance costs tend to be higher going through the federal government for a variety of different reasons, but there are some benefits in terms of just the fact that they are taxable from an annual disclosure and information basis. So the next slide here is an update from some revenue projections and debt service coverage projections given current market rates. So there's been a few changes here, certainly some more conservative assumptions when it comes to the structure of the debt. Previously, we were sending debt service you know, to achieve a more level coverage over time, but here we've, as you can see, we're ramping up debt service or increasing debt service over the first 10 to 12 years and then leveling out thereafter, which is certainly a more conservative approach in the long run. You know, here is just, again, a simple, you know, here are the revenues available for debt service, here's the projected cost, and what does that make on a ratio basis. So as you can see here, you know, starting in 2028, that number is higher, and it moves from, you know, about 3 to somewhere between 165 to 175 for the next 10-ish years, and then levels out around 1.5 in the long term. You know, there's a few caveats I'd like to offer with that. As I mentioned, these are just kind of pure revenue and expenses. There's also a surplus fund that is contemplated by the ordinance of 0.25% of debt service carried over year by year for coverage purposes. So in addition to this, there will be established a surplus fund, which is, again, 2.25% of annual debt service or maximum annual debt service that will be established and held to increase these numbers. So, you know, from a practical standpoint, there's another 0.25% or a 0.25 point of coverage there.
Just for those of us aren't as fast as math, what does that amount to?
You know,
Depends on the year.
Well, let's
Yeah.
go with the 2027. 2020, I don't know, pick a year.
Yeah, no, I mean, it'll be based on MAD, so what, 1/4 of 5.5 million, so just over $1 million probably, you know, 1.25 million, something like that, you know, as a surplus fund to kind of carry over and continue to smooth that coverage. The other point here, as you see, you know, coverage is relatively strong, particularly in the next 10 years, but the other caveat is municipal bonds are generally refinanced every 10 years, right? And so, you know, 10 years down the road, we expect to be able to call these bonds in from investors and refinance at lower rates. So at that time, you'll have a better revenue assumption going forward. You should be able to refinance at lower rates and would expect that the coverage would continue to improve. And then I can certainly cover this, and Kevin may jump in, but you know, a lot of the discussion with our team and with the county has really tried to build a resilient overall credit here for the county and for the airport. So, you know, more than anything, I think the debt reserve fund requirement has been a big thing, a development that's been incorporated into these numbers, which is established by ordinance and included in the financing should any shortfalls happen in the revenue and revenue is not able to make debt service payments. That reserve fund is kicked in at either the maximum annual debt service, which is currently contemplated, or another trigger to cover debt service shortfalls.
Go ahead.
I'm going to cover that. Here is just another comparison, again, of the county credit as compared to the general airport revenue bonds on their own standalone basis. So we compared these back in March when we spoke, and then we have updated them since. So here again, 0.5 to 0.75% higher in terms of interest rate would be expected if the airport did this on their own. What does that equate to? Just about $530,000 in annual debt service on an annual basis, or over $16.2 million over the life of the financing. Those costs come in a variety of different ways here, as you can see. Just in a simple comparison at the bottom, another $500,000 up front for a reserve fund, as I mentioned, then, over, $528,000 per year higher, and 16.2 over the life of the bonds. The other thing to consider here, with the county's blessing and the full faith and credit, it's a very desirable credit. There are not many credits in the airport space. I think that term was called a unicorn. But most airport bond buyers are used to revenue bonds, tax-exempt bonds that have lower credit ratings. So when they see something that is an airport revenue bond that has a AA+ credit rating, we expect the demand to be robust and really execute well. So in terms of being able to deliver the lowest cost of funds for this financing, certainly believe that the full faith and credit is very important in that.
If you run an analysis or scenario where the county does the 2026 series, and then TIFIA is provided for 2027 series, and what those numbers play out to be in terms of overall cost over the life of the project?
Yes, certainly we have. It is a lower cost because, as I mentioned, the interest cost will be lower just because of the applicable Treasury rate.
So you can share that analysis with us?
We certainly can. As I mentioned, though, there's still a lot to be kind of sifted through and worked through with TIFIA. But yeah, we're happy to.
Great, thank you.
And then this again is just a graphical comparison of the debt service between the two credits, showing the $530,000 increase per year.
And that's just the county bonding versus the airport bonding rate. So the A- versus A++, is that the
yeah,
basic
so
difference?
A AA+ versus a Baa2, which is on the lower end of investment grade. And the reasoning behind that is not necessarily the airport operations. Is these rating agencies really focus on emplanements, and emplanements are a big driver of how they look at airport credits, and just due to sheer size, right, of the airport and the emplanements compared to an O'Hare or a DTW or some of the larger airlines, it's just kind of a hard hurdle to overcome, and so that really drives a big difference in those.
Has the airport's bonding rating changed in the last couple of years?
So this is just an indicative or estimate in terms of when we modeled out their credit on a general revenue without the county full faith and credit. This is where we expected they would come in at that range.
B minus? Is that what you're saying?
Baa2, so triple B range.
To also answer the question, currently, we do not have a bond rating, so we'll be going to the market for a bond rating. Right now, we have no debt. So our bonds were paid off on the debt that was issued for the Terminal 2004 project. So that was paid off. So we currently do not have debt on the books.
So we just used an assumed debt rate for the blue bars on the prior graph?
For the green bars, yes.
For the green bars,
Yep.
sorry, for the airport's bonding.
Based on what we anticipate other airports have received to get that rating, very similar to us.
Yep.
Which airports did you use for that assumption?
So PFM modeled it out using Moody's methodology for airports using various emplanement data points and other things.
Which would be the non-hub airport category.
Correct.
And you'll share that with us?
If you would like to, yes.
Please.
I have a question.
Please.
Been waiting here. I understand how the more favorable interest rates come into play because of our bond rating, but can you talk a little bit about how the investor demand comes into this equation?
Yeah, certainly. In the capital markets, most investors really want a AA credit rating for their credit committees, for their bond holdings, for their different funds, that is like a big barrier or big kind of threshold to hit. Once you hit a AA credit rating, you know, the sea is kind of wide open in terms of investors. And so the more investors that obviously are able to buy your bonds drives competition, and that competition then drives down your rates, right? So if there's fewer investors out there that are able or willing to buy your bonds, they certainly set the rate, you know, or set their interest because there's less demand for it. And so by having that higher credit rating, you have certainly a wider swath of investors.
So is the kind of assumed rate right now also assuming that high investor demand, or is that an unknown that we're, you know, hopeful for in the future but don't know?
No, that's a really good question. I mean, it is inherently baked into the rate in terms of, you know, the kind of the spread, the credit spread for that. But, you know, it's more also to talk about the point of ease of or difficultness in the market, right? It certainly will be a smoother marketing issuance and order period or bond sale with a AA credit rating than it would be, you know, without.
Okay, thank you.
I will turn it over to Pat McGow.
Good morning, I'm Pat McGow. I'm the bond counsel to the Airport Authority for this project. I want to back up a little bit. We met back in March and we talked about various things related to what the bond documents will say and what this county pledge would look like. And in particular, the concern, of course, is to, from the county standpoint, is to protect the county's credit rating, so it understands what would happen in the event that there was a draw or a request for some of that money for a full faith and credit pledge. When we spoke back in March, we talked about various protections that we intended to put into the documents and what those would look like. I'm going to go through those here in a second. But just to back up a second, there are two main documents here that are being approved this fall in connection with this bond issue. So the first is the bond ordinance. That is the document that is approved by the Airport Authority Board, and that is the document that sets forth the various pledge of revenues, the structure of the funds, the flow of funds, and the covenants and the security. So this is sort of the main bond document which is approved by the Authority Board. So that's something we've been working on for several months. That was approved by the Authority Board at its meeting in October, so that has been approved. And that document essentially, it's in your packet after this presentation, but essentially speaks to the issuance of the bonds in the amount not to exceed $71 million in one or more series, and it sets forth these covenants and protections. The other document is the resolution that the county is being asked to approve, which includes the full faith and credit pledge, as well as other things in there, and we'll talk about that after we get through this presentation. So essentially, when we were putting the bond documents together, and we talked back in March, what we were looking for was a model that was something that was used here in Michigan. I think you're familiar with the fact that the Kent County Airport, which the authority articles are modeled after, uses the same kind of financing structure, which is that the authority issues revenue bonds and the county pledges its full faith and credit to give it that lower credit rating, lower cost of financing. And so that was really the starting point for the documents that we are using in this financing. We did share drafts of the documents with the county administration, your bond counsel, and your financial advisor back in October. They did provide some helpful comments that were incorporated, and that's what we took to the Authority Board for approval at their meeting on October 28th. So one of the things we talked about back in March, and that's really kind of the key thing here, is how this pledge works. So this is the slide that we had that talks about what the statute says, which is essentially that if the county pledge is made, then the county would be asked to provide funds to pay the shortfall in the debt service. And then it also says that if a public corporation makes payment from taxes or general funds, it shall be reimbursed from net revenues subsequently received. So this is what that looks like in the bond ordinance which was approved. The bold language is kind of the key here. So if the net revenues and amounts on deposit in the bond reserve account. So we talked a lot about the bond reserve account. That is a pot of money, roughly a year's debt service. It's available to draw on in the event of a shortfall before any request would be made from the county. If there are not sufficient funds, then a request would be made to the county to provide funds for the shortfall. And then it goes on to say if the county pays principal from its taxes or general funds, it shall be reimbursed from the net revenues as provided in Section 13B2. So that language looks like this. This is the section in the ordinance in the flow of funds. And I put it up here just to show that first, when the authority collects revenues, it has to pay its operating expenses. After that, the first thing the money will be used for, any extra, would be to reimburse the county if a pledge was drawn, before any reimbursement to the bond reserve account. So this is sitting up there, up in front, for reimbursement to the county from available net revenues after they're received. The other thing we talked about was a rate covenant. This is the idea that the authority is promising in the bond documents to set rates at a level which are sufficient to cover the operation and maintenance costs as well as the debt service. And we use something that's kind of called a rolling coverage test that effectively means that it has to set rates each year when taking into account the money in the surplus fund and the rates, that it has at least 125% of what it needs to pay the annual debt service requirement. So it's building in extra money into that formula so that if there is an off year, that 125% would cover the debt service.
Can you just clarify, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And this, I'm slow, so this might go to the prior question. Is the bond reserve account that must be tapped into before county general fund is tapped into, is that the quarter? Is that the surplus?
No, that's something separate.
Okay, can you just, make sure
we'll
we're
get to that in a
understanding which
second.
pieces we're talking
In
about.
fact, that's, so I'll talk about the bond reserve account. That'll be after this.
Okay,
So the rate covenant, though, is, this is, and Christina showed the revenue stream and the projections. The idea that you have projected in the budget 125% more than you need to cover the debt service in any given year. And that is taking into account money sitting in that surplus fund as well as what the rates and charges are. And one of the things that this analysis that the airport's been doing with the rate modeling and modernizing their rate methodology is to give them that extra flexibility to adjust rates as they go. So the idea is that they can make adjustments to those rates that they charge the airlines or for other non-airline revenue so that there are sufficient funds and they can make adjustments in the event that, the rate modeling is off or that it's an off year or something else.
And I just want to touch base on that. So we pass our rates and charges by ordinance every year. So we'll be passing if there's adjustments needed. So this will be evaluated every budget cycle and then passed by ordinance. So if we're seeing that there's something happening in the market, we can adjust those rates at not only annually, but at any given time throughout the year.
So before you step down, help us understand this. Hypothetically, the bond amount is $5 million. For whatever reason, it's a downturn year. So the airport board understands that next year it's got to raise its rates a little bit because they're not projected to cover that $5 million. Which rates, you've got concessions, but those are 20-year terms. I assume they are not susceptible to, so who can you charge? Is it parking? Is it the rental concessions? Which of those revenue sources are subject to that increase? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear you. Absolutely. All rates and charges can be subject. So even our concessionaire, what we set in their 20-year leases is minimum annual guarantees to ensure that they pay that. So we can adjust those minimal annual guarantees to make sure that that's paid. Same with our car rentals, same with our, we have all those adjustments in there. So our square footage rates are subject to that ordinance.
And so that's built into all the contracts with
Correct.
every concession, that
Correct.
all of their rates are subject to increase to cover these debts?
Correct. That's why our leases, specifically when we talk about like the airline leases, we'll be updating those and renegotiate those as we go into this project so everybody understands clearly that methodology.
So the bond reserve account, we were talking about that a moment ago. This is an account that is set aside that can only be used to pay debt service in the event of a shortfall of the revenues. And the bond reserve account is in the ordinance. It can be funded either by cash or cash equivalents. That cash equivalents term means something like a letter of credit or a surety bond. And the amount, the definition, this is dictated by federal tax law. It's the lesser of the maximum annual debt service on the bonds, 125% of the average annual debt service, or 10% of the aggregate principal amount. This is why we say it's roughly a year's worth of debt service. In the particular modeling that PFM showed a little while ago, it's based on the maximum annual debt service, and that number was about $3 million something for the first series and $5 million in total when the full bond issue is out there. So that would either be sitting in cash in an account that would be drawn on for shortfall, or it would be in the form of a surety bond from a financial institution like a letter of credit. The other thing we talked about is some other provisions that are in bond ordinances that protect or ensure that there's going to be money in the future. And one of the important ones is additional bonds tests. So the idea is that we are looking at these two bond issues together in this ordinance because it's essentially paying for the same project. So when we talk about, when the ordinance talks about the Series 2026 bonds, it means the 26 and the 27 together in that not to exceed $71 million. The airport may need to issue bonds in the future after these bonds are outstanding, and the ordinance sets forth the conditions that need to be satisfied in order for them to be able to issue additional bonds. And so there's a lot of language in here, but the important part in here is that in order to issue additional bonds, and this is common in the revenue bond market, you need to be able to demonstrate to the market that you have sufficient funds to pay that, and more than sufficient funds. So the idea is that to issue additional revenue bonds, you either have to show that based on your existing revenues, you can cover the debt service on the existing plus the new, or what's more typical is to have a report prepared by an airport consultant, a feasibility report that shows that you will have at least 125% more revenues than the debt service requirements. Again, that 125% number you see both in terms of the rate covenant and the additional bonds test to show that, you know, when we set rates or when we issue additional bonds, we're still projecting to have more money and more revenues coming in than what is needed to pay the debt service. So that kind of highlights what is in the bond ordinance and the covenants that are in there. Kevin, I don't know if this was your slide to wrap up, and then we can go on to the next stage.
Okay, go ahead. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for doing this with us again. We greatly appreciate it. First, I'd like to thank you for the relationship TVC has experienced with Grand Traverse County for many years.
Steve?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he did. Steve Plamondon, Chair of the Northwest Regional Airport Authority. I live in Leelanau County. We obviously have presented you with a lot of information today. The projections we have presented are all based on very conservative forecasts. We do anticipate similar growth to what we have achieved recently, which will help us exceed these expectations. TVC finds itself in an interesting position right now we've not experienced in recent times. The terminal expansion will be our first step we have incurred in decades. Although this is a great situation to be in for many reasons, it brings us before you today. Had we established credit history recently, we would hope to enjoy a similar credit rating to Grand Traverse County. Since this is not the case, we're not so fortunate, we need to receive your full faith and credit. If we don't, we project $16 million additional debt. Can Traverse City support this debt? Yes, we can at the airport. However, this would require us to pass on this additional debt to our stakeholders, customers and passengers and tenants. As shown in our presentation, 50% of our customers are local, within 50 miles of the airport. If we need to pass this cost on to them, we will be passing it on to our families, friends, neighbors, business travelers, and constituents. I strongly hope you will provide us with your full faith and credit for our Gates to the Future project, which will benefit all of us for years to come. Thank you.
That concludes our presentation, so any questions? We're open.
Any questions? If for the board, go ahead, Commissioner
I
Ansel.
have questions for you, Kevin. Actually, in full transparency to everyone watching, I'm on the airport board, but Kevin can answer some things more eloquently than me, so I'm just going to throw him some softball questions, just to be completely transparent. But with this project, if the airport gets everything it's asking for, what are the chances that passengers would see an increase in ticket prices based on this expansion?
If the full faith and credit came in, there should be no impact to the rate base, I should say the rate base of the airfare being passed on to the customer. So taking this off, the airlines have seen that this is a necessity. They built this in already, so you're not going to see ticket prices like go up. In fact, we're seeing ticket prices as a whole go down. However, if we don't, then that will go back into the rate base and they'll be passed along.
Okay, so I grew up, born and raised right here in Traverse City, and when I was young, no one in my family got on airplanes. That was for rich people. That was expensive, and we drove to Florida. It's a 26-hour drive. That's how we got around. Today, I have friends that have never made median income in their life and probably never will, who have a family in Florida, and for $200, a couple can get on a plane and go to Florida round trip. Why are the tickets so much cheaper? I know they're not all that cheap, but
Sure.
If you look, you can find these tickets.
Yep.
Why are they so much more affordable today than when I was young?
Competition. So more competition has come into the market. We see more passengers, and when you see more passengers, more competition. So with that, it drives down the prices. So it's about, simple economics is there's more supply of seats in the market. So with the more supply of seats in the market, that has driven down prices. So with that, we attracted carriers like Allegiant, who's an ultra low cost carrier, who flies less than daily, but based on volume. So with that, they can charge those $50 fares one way and be able to make money. So that's our concern, is how do we impact those carriers that are doing very well now if we add additional cost to them?
Can you talk about the importance of gathering the out-of-area travelers, the bigger circle of people who will drive here versus going to Grand Rapids, to keep those prices low?
Sure. So when you look at, we have our core group that we call the local. But as we reach out, we impact really a radius of all of northwestern lower Michigan and into the eastern UP. So when you impact that population, then it translates into a formula for service from the airlines. So for example, United Airlines, we receive hub service from every major hub except for LA and San Francisco. The reason they'll do that is because of the population base that they see here. They also know then, the other half of that equation is those coming in for business or tourism that are a highly marketable area. So they then look at that impact and translate that into number of seats, how the fares are impacted, and that. So the broader base of our region only improves the availability of the amount of seats that will come into the market. Long answer for seats, more seats.
So in a nutshell, the more people that fly out of the airport, the more inexpensive the tickets potentially could be.
Correct.
Okay. Cherry Capital Airport, just being inside it, is one of the nicest airports I've ever been in. How did that happen? How did that come about, that it is like you're walking into an up north woods cabin versus, a people mover that's, very institutional?
That's because of Team TVC. They take care of it every day. They make that, it's an intentional act that we do and drive for every day. The design started years ago and brought in that architecture of the up north feel, the Frank Lloyd Wright design, the prairie style that's there. but it's the everyday taking care of it because it's the community's airport.
The building project itself, how many months should that span realistically?
So we look to put shovels in the ground here in March of '26, and our goal is to be completed by Memorial Day of 2028. So
Okay,
probably
so-
roughly 2 years.
So about 2 years, and during that time, in addition to everything this does for the airport, have there been any speculations or studies done on what this will do for the local economy when you're dumping millions of dollars and people are coming here to work and they're spending money locally?
So we've worked with the state of Michigan on those estimates. And right now, we're using the 2017 annual economic impact, and that's $1 billion. The state of Michigan will estimate with the new jobs and everything associated with the terminal growth, it'll be closer to that $2 billion economic impact.
So we spend around 120 million, and it impacts the greater economy by $1 billion?
Yeah, almost $1 billion.
For that 2-year span?
Correct.
And that's people moving here
That's annually, it's
temporarily,
people
or-
moving here, businesses coming here, increased demand. You'll see, just because populations are increasing that we've seen, so that increases freight coming through the airport, that increases the amount that we impact in additional services. And so that translates out to,
Okay.
yeah.
Are there numbers for like job creation, that sort of thing?
So we base that conservatively. We're looking at about another 150 jobs just on the airport alone, plus the construction jobs that will be generated to build the terminal, which will range between 100 and 150 on its own. But those will be more short-term for the 2 years, and then those 150 jobs will carry on. Those will be airline employees, TSA employees, gift shop employees, car rentals.
Okay. And I just got a couple more questions, and this is something I've learned about transparency is never assume somebody knows what you said in the past. So I know you've addressed these issues, but just so we touch on them, and we probably should every time we talk about this stuff. Let's first touch on the tree cutting at the graveyard.
Sure.
What's the story there?
There is no project for tree cutting in Oakwood Cemetery at this time. What has been brought up is the fact that the city has an ordinance to maintain the trees in the cemetery to a height that allows the use of that north-south runway. So that's been talked about for years. When the airport moved there in 1935, 30 years afterwards, it was discussed in the 60s. There was some tree trimming and things that went on. It then got brought up again in the 1990s. And the reason it's getting brought up again is it's about 30 years it's coming up. So it's a project that would be worked and developed together with the city. The airport would be very interested in that and supporting that. We've had, I think, discussion with every city manager in the last 10 years to see what will happen when we get to that point. What is it? But then we've also said we can go in and do what we've done every 30 years, or you can look at a long-term solution. What is the needs? And so none of that has been talked about. None of that's been evaluated, except for we know what the ordinance says and we know what could be done. So each city manager has brought maybe their version, and we've had those discussions, but there is no project at this time.
Okay, so the Oakwood Cemetery is a pristine sanctuary for the people of our city. It's got some of our city founders in it. If the airport had everything it wanted in the Oakwood Cemetery, what would look different about it?
Well, one of the suggestions is if we could start planting now, new vegetation that wouldn't grow as high to not impact, that would give you a long-term solution. There are other things of just trimming the trees that can be done. But what we've talked about is, and especially at the airport board level, we've talked about is what can we do as a community to make it better, to invest in it. And so we've talked about bringing $1 million to the table to be a part of that. But none of that, again, there's no project, there's nothing to, we want it to be a community asset. We don't want to impact it.
Okay, so what I've heard is, as old trees die, replant them with native species that grow to the appropriate height to where that tree is at.
Absolutely. That would be an easy.
Okay, so it's, the idea isn't to go cut out all the trees that are non-conforming,
No.
but rather wait them out over the decades as trees naturally die as they get old.
Yep.
Okay. Longer runways. This one comes up every so often too. They're gonna, build a tunnel, make them longer. Is there any thought about that? Someday would it be needed?
No, the four corners of the airport are not needed to move. So if you look at the length of the runways, they are sufficient now to get us to the West Coast. And even with the new aircraft that are being developed, like the Airbus A321 XLR, the distance to Europe on the length of our runway can be achieved. So no, the answer is the four corners of the airport, no tunnels, no runway extensions, we're solid.
I heard the explanation at one point that today's jet engines are stronger, quieter, take off faster. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
So as technology continues to improve, there's really no need for extended runways.
That is correct.
And finally, the other one is the idea of moving the airport. And I totally get this, because there was a point when I was on that team, like, yeah, let's get that airport out of here. And then when we looked at the numbers, we're talking about massive deforestation of another area. And guess what? People live out there too, no matter where you go. So what is your answer to that concern of airports in the wrong place?
Certainly. So we've looked at that for years, and you can actually go back to 1935 and looking at where they placed it in the first place. And in 1935, it was placed so far out of town, no one will use it, according to the Historical Society. Well, the town moves out to an airport, and that's typical of all airports across the country. Denver is a great example. They moved it 35 miles out of town. Now the town of Denver has moved around the airport. So that's one of the things that we looked at. So when we've looked at what do we need, the first need is about 3,000 to 5,000 acres of land that's level, flat. So when you look across northern Michigan, where would you find 3,000 acres that doesn't have a forest, wetland, or another issue? So environmental impacts are quite high when you consider moving it. Then we looked at what does it take to build a runway, what does it take to build taxiway infrastructure, to build a terminal, to move all the tenants. And with watching others that are out there that have looked at the same thing and given us a ballpark cost, we estimate that cost to be around $5 billion to move the airport and rebuild it. However, then on top of that, all the grants that were utilized to build the current airport are required to be repaid. So there might be some the FAA might give us grace on, but that's estimated also at about $1 billion. So our number is about $6 billion. When you look at that type of program, there is absolutely no guarantee on federal participation. So if we were to start building a $6 billion new facility, we might not get federal grant dollars to do it because they already invested in the current location. So with that said, we then, to get and raise that kind of fund, we'd have to come back to the taxpayers to do it. I don't know that a $6 billion project would be supported for that.
It's about half the value of the real estate in the county, I think. No, Dean? All right, that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Flynn.
As someone who's grown up near Bishop and raised by two Long Islanders near JFK, I mean, I understand the importance of an airport nearby. That being said, it's right in the middle of District 2, and I know a lot of my constituents are very worried. I live in Oakwood Triangle. I have to mute my computer during my Zoom meetings as well. What do you say to those constituents that are not for this because it's right going over their houses?
Well, absolutely. So one, when we look at noise, we've done a noise study, and what is as Commissioner Henschel brought up, we're seeing new engine technology. So as that new engine technology comes on, we've seen our noise modeling shrink those contours into the airport. So as we go forward, we continue to see that happening. The other complaint that we're hearing specifically from your district is actually not of the jets, but of the smaller aircraft doing pattern work over and over again. So we've started reaching out more and more to our flight schools to ensure they're at a higher pattern altitude. And we've done that specifically through our rules and regulations at the airport. And we're also then, we've asked the college and our other flight programs to, we'll call disperse some of their flying across northern Michigan. So we've put some of those, I'll call them voluntary type programs together and have worked with that. We're also looking to work in the future. We brought in our air traffic control tower group to help us. Can we do, I'll say, different patterns when they are practicing landings and takeoffs that may widen it out and put it over a less residential area, more over a roadway instead, which when they're practicing under those, they're under visual flight rules, so the visibility to follow a roadway is very easy. So those are not standard patterns, but they are more productive for our communities, and so we'll be working on that going forward in the future.
I do feel like it's really hard not to find a residential area around our airport currently.
Well, you have roadways that they can fly that run north-south. You have Garfield, you have Barlow, you have others, but you also have coming over the lake, the Boardman Lake, that can be done. So you have areas that can be directed so it's not right above it. So there are areas.
Going back to the number of jobs this project could create, I feel like also a lot of jobs could be created by moving the airport out somewhere else, also by building houses at the airport. So either way, there could be a lot of economic development and jobs created.
I'm not going to dispute you on that. The only caution I have is anytime an airport is moved, it's usually years before that airport is usable for housing and other developments. So to see that immediate effect, it's probably, if you were to do it today, again, it's my estimate, 25, 30 years before you're looking at.
I think we're all in government here. We know that it doesn't happen overnight with any project,
Yep.
but I hear you what you're saying.
Yep.
Commissioner Spence, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for your presentation. When we had the public comments in the beginning, I think it would have been appropriate just to talk about those things, the trees in Oakwood Cemetery not being removed. But I have to say, like, Boone Street lost a lot of trees, and when I was on the Garfield Township Parks and Recreation Commission, the FAA, who mandates some of this vegetation removal, came in and decimated an area that was in a residential area, promised to plant grasses and small shrubs that wouldn't max out at a height that wasn't okay, but they never did. They didn't do it.
So I can address that. So when those issues were negotiated, aviation easements were negotiated. So each homeowner or each property owner was paid for that easement. In that easement calculation, they were paid to replant trees. They were paid to, some were to put air conditioning in, some chose to put windows in. So they were paid for all of that. So then it becomes, after the easement is signed in its place, it becomes the homeowner's responsibility to plant those trees, to plant that follow-up. So from the airport, we use grant dollars to pay for that, and I would say the average was about $30,000 per homeowner that they received in ballpark. So that
I never got that feedback from anyone, especially at the Parks and Recreation Department. What's that?
They were paid for the easement. That was one compensation package, and they were additionally paid a separate amount to do replantings or other mitigation
Can you state your name?
Sorry, Carrie Zeitz, General Counsel for the NRAA. So they got two payments, one for the easement and one for their mitigation efforts for replantings, et cetera, based on their estimates and their ideas of what they wanted to do for mitigation and plantings. And so they were paid for that. Whether they actually did it or not is up to the homeowner.
So my objective in asking this question is that I'd like to see these in writing, all these things that we're going to do to help improve the quality of life of the people who have written me. I've gotten a lot of emails just in the last 24 hours about people whose quality of life is going to be impacted. We heard it from public comment. I mean, it's your money. You want us to bond, give our full faith and credit for this bonding, and it's your money. It does come on our backs, but I just want to make sure that if we're talking about replanting and not removing the trees in the Oakwood Cemetery, that is in writing and it's documented so that people who live in the area can see it.
It's already in writing. It's under an ordinance with the city of Traverse City.
Okay, but that's not my only question. I just wanted to,
Yeah,
I
so-
just wanted to bring that up because of my past experience with Parks and Rec and
Yep.
the
I
things that
understand
didn't
clearly,
happen.
and
Okay.
if there's a project, we have to go through that process, through the abrogation easement process and the negotiation process. But in the Oakwood Cemetery, that's why there's not a project in place right now, because that clearly falls to the city of Traverse City under their ordinance and their responsibility to handle the Oakwood Cemetery. So as an airport, if I can't put something in writing that is clearly defined as an ordinance by another governmental entity.
FAA, okay, but.
No,
hey,
this is
I
the
heard
city
it.
of Traverse City.
Okay. So thank you for responding to
Yep.
that. These are just things that were written to me that I think are really good points that I wanted to bring up.
Absolutely, and
The
I
other-
don't want anybody to go away thinking that we want to destroy or impact the cemetery in a negative way. We don't. We want to see that. We have families from the airport that are also in that cemetery. So we're not looking to do what everybody is fearing here today.
Okay, I
So I
understand.
want
Thank
that.
you. Okay, so the next thing is, why not Leelanau County? Why aren't they involved in guaranteeing this since about 30% of the
I'm going to turn that
Airport
over to
Authority-
legal counsel
yeah,
for that
but
answer.
30% of the Airport Authority reside in Leelanau, so I'm just.
Yep, very
that's
good
a
question. The answer is that the state law says that the county in which the facilities that are being financed are located can pledge their full faith and credit. So because the airport is in Grand Traverse County, that means Grand Traverse County and not Leelanau. So that's why Leelanau County, they were involved in the beginning last fall to approve the bonds when we had that joint meeting last year, as required under the articles, but under the state law, only the county in which the airport is located can pledge their full faith and credit.
Thank you. Okay, that's clear.
We did make the offer to Leelanau County if they wanted to participate, and they declined.
They scoffed, I think was the word.
Okay. And then finally, my last question, it's a $71 million ask. I'm just comparing it to our jail that's going to be built, which is between $50 and $60 million. So I feel like a $71 million terminal expansion for additional legroom and a place to sit for a few months out of the year is a lot of money to spend on that without having a parking deck. Like, I would think that with that amount of money, that maybe a parking deck would be part of it. And why not a parking deck?
We'd love a parking deck. It's going to cost, though, for about 500 spaces, about $30 million. So parking decks are about 10 times the cost of a surface level deck. And so that is in our future at some point in time, but it's not here now today. We just added a 360 space, parking lot that we're calling our economy lot. That lot cost us about $2.7 million. So that's where you're seeing the trade-off of a parking deck and the overall long-term cost. At some point in time, though, with growth and activity, once an airport sees between 2,500 and 3,000 cars, and we're right now about 1,700 with the new spaces, and that's when you start really thinking about going up with the parking deck. That then translates in how do you do it? How do you offset a large cost like that? Well, you have to get other tenants to be using the parking deck at the same time the public is. So that would be a project that's a combination with our rental cars and using that also. So we're completing a parking study as this process is going through. But right now, a deck is not in the cards.
So it's your money, you want $71 million to build a terminal expansion. Have we seen how that would break down? Like, what would be the costs and where the money would go for that?
So you break down as per construction area?
Yeah, like how much is going to go to finishings? I'm just curious, because it's a lot of money for an airport.
Bob?
And
Yeah, we'll bring you to,
So again, Bob Nelson, airport engineer. So rough breakdown is about 80 million for the structure, and then another 26 million for the apron, and then the rest of it is essentially support facilities, soft costs, that sort of stuff. So it's a $120 million project.
that's right, okay. And you provided that earlier. Maybe you've given that when we had our last conversation in March, but it'd be interesting to see it broken down. If you have it. Thank you.
Commissioner Morris, you get your hand waving?
Oh, sure. Not fair, he took all my questions right off the top. But I had just kind of a bottom line kind of question. We've heard that this is based on the airport's needs today, like there's serious crowding concerns during peak times, right?
correct.
So I feel like what you're asking for us is not permission to do this, because you're going to do this with or without us, because it's what you need. But what you're asking from us is the ability to do it more financially efficiently, so the dollars spread further and there's more benefit to the folks who are already using the airport and already vending at the airport, et cetera. Right?
Well said, well said.
Okay. That's it.
Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, full disclosure, I'm on the Airport Authority Board, as you guys know, and so I've seen a lot of the numbers and I've seen the revenue. When I first joined the board, I was really surprised how similar the airport, think about the business of the airport, running the airport, looking at the financials, and it's almost like a commercial real estate venture. You have tenants like a mall would, and you have concessionaires, you have property you rent out. And I was surprised that over 70% of the revenue is not related to those plane landing. It's servicing those planes. You've got parking, you've got concessions, you've even got the Costco rental, and I found that somewhat interesting. And then as this request came to me as a commissioner, I sat and I was looking through the numbers. I'm a numbers guy. I like to, get my hands around it and think about how it works. And so it kind of came to me one night that this is really familiar. And I did commercial real estate where I was the landlord for commercial buildings. And quite often when a prospective tenant comes to you, they have a business idea. And they're going to invest a whole bunch of money in the building that you own, but they're also pledging to maybe $75,000 a year in rent for 5 years. So you're looking at a $250,000 contract with that individual, and maybe they're going to put maybe $500,000-$600,000 into your building. And so you want to see, does this individual, is this the first time they've ever done this business? Do they have a track record? What are they doing? And so you kind of dig into the numbers the same way that we're digging into these numbers here. And you look, does it make sense? Is it plausible that this is going to happen? The best case scenario is when you had somebody that had a business somewhere else and they're duplicating it here. Worst case scenario might be somebody who's brand new, they got this great new idea and they're going to open up a restaurant that they've never done it before. And the bankers will tell you, my fellow commissioner might tell you that restaurant business is tough, and bankers will tell you want to be the second guy that owns a restaurant, not the first guy, because you get it for half price. But, so, and that's not all cases, and there are some that are very good at it, and they know what they're doing. But, so anyway, and one of the other things you do when you're working with this potential tenant, which you're starting a relationship with this individual, and it's for the other businesses you have connected to it. A lot of my retail or commercial buildings were next to other ones, and if there's a failure at one, that affects your other one, so it affects my income. So what I'm talking about is not somebody else's money or tax money. I'm talking about my money, the money that goes to my pocket. So it's important, and so you dig into it. And the other thing that you tried to do with that individual is how can you help their project be successful? Maybe it's sharing a well, or sharing, you've got easements you can change, or access to the building, parking, and all that kind of thing. And quite often, we worked out some shared parking, some shared well, all those things, so that there wasn't an added cost to that tenant that made it even harder. And so that's what kind of hit me is like, we're looking at a very large project in our community that we want to be successful. I think everybody wants it to be successful. And by saddling another $16 million onto this I wouldn't say puts it at risk, but it's another weight around the neck of that project that is going to be passed on to the customers. And if we can, I'm looking at the risk of this, without a lot of risk, we can help this project move along. We can share in that partnership that makes this a very viable and good thing for our community. So the numbers, if you change some of the, knock off some of the, or move the decimal point over, very similar to what I used to look at when I used to for a living. So I looked at it that way, and that'd be my comment from my fellow commissioners is the numbers are very conservative. It's an ongoing concern with a proven track record. And I think as the county and the taxpayers, we want to give this every chance of being a very successful and ongoing project. So I think from my standpoint, they'd be a good commercial tenant, so I'm in favor, so.
Good, Commissioner Walter.
Did you say our bond counsel is hiding behind the screen too?
Hiding?
Well, I mean, I can't see him, so, but I think you said that in the beginning. So this is, and I know we received this information before, but I think for the public benefit, it would be good to hear it from our bond counsel again about the county's ability to take on this debt and also finance other projects that we're considering, like the jail, like expansion on Lafreniere, moving the governmental center, Project Alpha, all the facilities master plan possibilities. And if we can, since there's, I think, more people paying attention to this now and wondering about that, we've received that information, but if we can hear that again from our bond counsel, that would be helpful, and I know he's there somewhere, I think.
Good morning, everybody. This is Roger Swets from Dickinson Wright, and I do work as your bond counsel. I think we also have Steve Burke from MFCI on the call, who is the county's financial advisor, again, representing your interests solely in this matter. And I'm going to turn it over to Steve in a minute, because I think his views are probably, this is more of a practical question that falls into Steve's lap. Legally, this is what, the county legally has very large debt capacity. So legally speaking, you can certainly do this. The other thing I would say before turning this over to Steve is that, there's been a lot of mention of the Kent County situation. I do act as bond counsel for Kent County. My partner acts as bond counsel for the airport. And so we have looked at this very carefully to make sure that this does kind of fit within the parameters that Kent County does, because that's really the best example in the state for this kind of partnership. So, certainly I don't want to tell you this isn't a real obligation, because it absolutely is. But if as a matter of policy, the board wishes to provide this support to the airport, I think the arrangements have been designed in a very reasonable way to strike a balance between providing that support and giving the county what protection it can have with the reserve funds and the surplus fund and et cetera. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. But I think the gist of your question is really more of a financial question as to whether or not this debt load is going to impact the practicalities of being able to finance the projects on the county's list. And so I'll turn it over to Steve to talk about that.
I'm going to hold you guys up right there because we're not getting your pictures for the meeting, so we're going to take a 10-minute break while Administrator Alger figures this out. Thank you.
Maybe Nate.
You look very chic.
I don't think, you need a hammer. You need a hammer, Nate. If nothing else, it scares the technology
Except
queen.
I shrunk it and
Makes it more
now
dense.
it's a little too small, yes.
Oh, looks great. It looks great.
Do you want me to grab somebody from IT?
Welcome.
What?
Yeah, just stretching. I am an old man, though.
I know, I'm getting there myself. I just drove to Florida. My
They're
folks
coming. I don't know, it's as simple as hitting the,
So I drove there Friday.
switches over, but
Oh, I think,
it says it's on,
I'm like
but it's
wearing a
just
white
not.
Christmas shirt to make you look fresh.
Yeah.
I got a necklace on, my mom sent me these. Nice. I'm glad you made.
When you're behind me.
You should.
Shows good sense.
So it just looks stupid. Morning, sir, how are you? How you doing? Good.
Regular screens.
I may want you to take your HDMI out. Let me see if this works once I get this system.
Is that our computer right there, Bob? Oh, okay.
It should just switch to Dias.
So, yeah, and then the Dias is your,
Yeah, it's just a laptop right here.
oh, it's that.
It's trying to switch, it's just not picking up.
Because they're on here. Yeah, okay.
Camera isn't working.
Is there a way to start this fairly?
The infamous restart.
Yeah, we have to do it. That's the only reason I'm.
Really don't want to
Tells
reset.
you it's
System off, just shut the.
Thinking, I've got water.
Ever since.
So are you controlling the meeting from this computer?
Well, and I'm not condemning for that. I'm kind of portly myself.
Oh, yeah, that is.
Well, the ordinance right now says that if it.
So here's my
comment was, yeah.
Not quite.
She's been here. Lady's been waiting.
Hey, thanks. You guys did a good
There were
job.
people in front of her.
We're not done yet, right?
Well, this has gone on way too long. We're not gonna, agenda was too long too. Now we're definitely.
You know, if TJ leaves, I'm gonna take it personal, he left, and then if TJ leaves, I'm gonna think, what did I do?
Put deodorant on this morning?
I should have showered, I guess.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to call this meeting back to order. Mr. Arroger, are we ready to go? I don't know. You don't know? Roger, Steve, can you hear us? Or is it Richard?
Roger, can you hear us?
There he is.
Roger.
Our mic is muted.
Can you hear us, Roger?
Yes, I can. Can't see you, but we can hear you.
Right, you're not missing out on much.
We can see you now.
How about now, Roger?
Have to see them as an
I can still hear you, but not see you.
It's not for us, it's for the people at home that are watching.
Well,
got it.
we're on the wrong device. I'll let you look at Bob.
Does he need to see us?
Yeah, right?
Go ahead.
You're on
That's
screen,
good.
Roger, so go ahead.
Are we ready to resume?
We are. Yep.
There's Steve.
Yeah, so did you all hear what I had said before we took the break?
Yeah.
Right. So here's my big question.
Okay.
I'm going to jump ahead. So we've committed to about $90 million in construction projects, not including the airport. So as we look forward to building on Lafreniere or rehabbing this building, and if you include the airport, my hillbilly math is somewhere between 170 and $200 million. So let's say we get the bond out, what's the airport is anywhere between half and a third of that bond commitment. Can we bond $215 million and not lose our bond rating?
Oh, no, we can't hear him. Hold on.
I can hear you, but your microphone might not be on. Oh, that's why.
Me okay?
Yeah.
There we go. Try it again.
Start over.
All right, very good. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, very good. So again, Stephen Burke, MFCI, we're the financial advisor to the county. And I think we may have lost
You're still good, Steven.
you guys again.
We're here. We can hear you.
So, Stephen, the board can hear you. Yeah, the short version is they can hear you.
Okay, very good. Sorry for the technical issues. So we, I guess going back to when we spoke, so two pieces to this. So one, a question of the airport, our concerns when we met back in a year ago was seeing some additional credit enhancements for the county's protection be added to this, which the airport was complied, and that's what you've seen here with the bond reserve account and the rate covenant that discussed earlier. So those were our two big concerns from last year's meeting. So that improves the likelihood that the county's general fund would not be called upon to step up. Now, it doesn't completely remove it, but obviously that gives an extra layer of protection of at least a year of debt service protection on account there. So that's the first piece of it. The second piece, of how much debt can the county take on. So our analysis was in addition to the airport's debt. So if we're looking at a total of 70 million for the airport, and then I think your math there was getting you maybe 125 million of additional county debt. At 125 million of additional county debt, it will certainly call into question whether or not we can maintain a AA. All things or AA plus. All things being equal from today's. If we issued it all today, I think that the likelihood of a downgrade would be high. That said, we're not issuing all of that today, and the county's plan would be to issue that over at least the next 7 to 8 years, or maybe longer, depending on the timing of things. So given that, just this year, the county's revenue growth, total governmental revenue, it was up about 16 million from the prior year. The total governmental revenue is the denominator when we do the calculation of your current debt cost divided by revenue. So by the county continuing to get larger and a larger revenue base, that offset a chunk of this additional debt from the airport, and any additional debt from the county. So I think when we would discuss this, and you guys saw this, last year we were concerned that additional debt of even 50 or 75 million started to call into fact that this county's debt, or the county's bond rating score, was kind of in between a AA plus and a AA, and I think the likelihood of it tripping over would be low, even if the county added 50 or 75 million. We have rerun that data, and I think that tipping point now is much closer to 100 to 125 million, where the county starts to score in between. And again, that's from the county continuing to grow its revenue base, grow its tax base. All things being equal, again, if you issued all of that today, that's probably a problem. But that's not the case, and certainly the county's not going to be stagnant over that time period as well. So I think that continuing to look at these projects, the biggest thing is identifying revenue sources up front for the county's future debt issuances. The airport is a revenue source for this. These will be, as long as the airport continues to support the debt and has the net revenues to support the debt, as the years go by, typically 3-year look back, at least for S&P, they will start to deem the airport's revenue or the airport's debt as self-supporting. And so that'll be an important piece for the county, that starts to then fall off of your debt score, and becomes self-supporting. But that only happens after 3 years of net revenues backwards looking. So that's really, that's going to be several years in the future as the airport needs to get this facility open and to start generating the additional revenues to get to that point. So that's several years down the road, but it's certainly something that's going to occur. And then for the county as well, as you look at whether it be the jail or Alpha or a governmental center, identifying where those revenues are going to come from, you're going to be very important when S&P starts to look at your bond rating score and things start to be in between ratings. They're going to say, okay, well, what are the other factors, that mitigate this additional debt, and what does it look like? And as you can point to that and say, this is where the revenue is coming from, they're going to be much more likely to tip you towards the higher end rather than, the downgrade.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for these gentlemen?
I just like, Steve, is that, you said you've updated the analysis since you provided it a year ago. Can you share your updated analysis with us?
Certainly.
Thank you. So let's wrap this up. Any more questions for the folks that are here? Kevin and his wonderful staff, or Roger or Stephen? I got 2 questions for you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone. My first question is, so I'm the projected annual net debt service, and I'm just throwing this out there. Is there a spot where, let's say, God forbid, that you experience less than 1% of growth? What year on that can you take care of your debt service?
We can take care of our debt service starting today. I see no problem with, if we were flat going forward with the revenues, today, I feel very comfortable in making that payment.
Beautiful. My next question is, it goes back to the trees. Isn't the airport its own zoning authority now, or the FAA, and we voted saying, hey, you could be your own zoning authority?
So, and that is what you're talking about, the joint zoning, that gets back to the state act, so both counties approve that. Basically, what that is for is actually to allow for waivers and variances from the state law. So a great example is if let's say there was a structure that was violating airspace ordinances, the answer from the state would be no. However, we can help and put variances in place that might allow for that structure, like a light or certain paint markings on that structure, or the notification of people that might be living in that structure that an airport's nearby. So that is why that board was created, to give more opportunities for our locals to have a voice. Because when those things were being made, those decisions were being made at the state and federal level, we had no voice. So that's why that committee is put together. It gives us more opportunity to do that. And we've seen the success that have done the same thing to get those variances. We already saw success here on 8th Street in allowing that where the old Tebow Forest was developed, to get that variance through. So we form that for the betterment of the community.
Does that apply to trees too, maybe?
It applies to anything that could, those surfaces, correct.
Maybe you could share who serves on that committee too, that might be
Thank you.
helpful.
That's a good point.
Certainly. Bob, you want to share the committee, everybody that's on all the township?
Yeah, the current joint zoning board is made up a lot of the area planners from townships. We also have some other representatives. You guys appointed a couple representatives as well to that, but primarily zoning administrators at this time from Leelanau and Grand Traverse. Yep.
Isn't the city zoning administrator?
So there's a couple of different, so now there's the Joint Zoning Commission, which is developing the ordinance. That is made up of the Garfield, East Bay, and city planners that are in addition to our buildings and grounds group. So we do have a lot of local buy-in and help with building up that ordinance.
Questions?
Go ahead, Teed.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you bringing up the city. Is there a city representative on the airport board? I was trying to think if there was anybody on that board that lives in the city.
Yes, Dan Johnkoff does. Wayne Schmidt also currently does.
Oh, but he was just replaced, I understand.
Yes, he was.
Okay. Mr. Johnkoff, okay. Quick question about the trees. I know we need to move on. We've got a busy agenda. You indicated that the city has an ordinance that establishes how to comply with height requirements.
Correct.
As I understand it. I assume the city doesn't decide how high the trees need to be in order to comply. That comes from either the FAA
Correct.
or
The state.
And
the
what
FAA.
is that height at Oakwood Airport, Oakwood Cemetery?
It varies across. So
Can you-
I would
can
say
you give us the-
approximately 35 feet closest to the airport, and probably 65, 70 feet at the north side.
At 8th Street there?
Yeah.
And sorry, my last question. I see there are 4 new bridges as part of the proposal. That was what?
Jet bridges, those are the.
Jet bridges, right.
Yep.
Does that mean that's about almost double what's there now?
Yes, we will have 8 total gates. We have 5 gates, but 1 gate will be replaced because of the way we connect the building in, so you'll have 4 and 4 at the end.
So how many flights per day are you projecting, and how many do you have now?
So at our peak, we're looking at about 72 flights per day. And the way the FAA determines the use of those facilities is, we use a logistics program to program the use of each gate. And it's based on the type of aircraft, the amount of time it takes. So if it's a 50-seat regional jet, it takes less time than a 192-seat Airbus 321. So there's gate occupancy time for each type of aircraft. When you apply that, we look at the amount of spaces, or we'll call it parking spaces, lead-in lines. So the FAA standard that was applied to the airport for approval to build an additional concourse was based on the fact that we need 8 parking spots. However, our consultant report, when it looked into the future, based on, or I shouldn't say in the future, based on the current need, excuse me, you could see justification up to 14 gates.
And
But the FAA said 8 for now.
Okay, so just to clarify, what is the number of flights per day now? Say-
72.
How many?
We have 72 flights now
And
for
what-
airline flights.
72 today, and what is the projected when there's double the number of gates?
So to meet the current demand, it would be 72 right now.
In 2027, 2028, after there are now 8 gates, what is the number of projected flights per day?
I don't have that projection because we don't do a projection based on that. It's based on the current use of that. We can guess, and I don't, and that's guess with working with airlines and everything else. You could see 2 to 3 more cities added to our airport, but that's a decision the airlines make.
So the point of, so right now in July, I assume, peak month, there are 72 flights per day.
Correct.
Already with 4 gates. Doubling the number of gates is going to increase the number of flights. No? Why not?
Because we're parking them in remote spots right now to handle them. So, yes, I understand now, I understand the question better is, yes, if you were to look at that, but we're handling them at remote spots. When you hear me reference, we had the bus passengers in, we've parked them in a remote spot on the ramp, and we bus passengers to the terminal to use the terminal. So we've made that as efficient as we possibly can. So if we add this concourse, we're still only serving those airplanes that we're parking remotely.
So I just don't have to go outside anymore to get on the airplane, is what you're telling me? Or eventually?
Yeah, correct.
Have you gotten any updated assessments since, I think it was a 2023 Mead and Hunt study that sort of looked at projected growth and needs and designed the concourse? Is there anything updated since?
No, that was the justification report that was put together so we could go to the FAA to justify what was happening today.
And then there was I think in August of 2024, financial plan. Has that been updated?
That the information you provided today was the updated information.
And
so
we're going to get that.
Correct.
We got the sort of pie graphs, and we're going to get
We'll
the
get the
details.
data behind it.
Great,
Correct.
thank
Yep,
you.
Yep.
Going once, going twice. Commissioner Nelson?
I'll just make a comment. My daughter would be horrified if I said her name, Emily Moyer, here in the meeting, 'cause that would just But my daughter lives in Denver, and it's a direct flight most of the year now. And quite often when she's coming in, we're going to pick her up, she'll be on the ground for a long time. They're held back because it takes a certain amount of time and the gates are full. So she kind of complains to me. She says, "Dad, it takes me, I'm on the ground in Traverse City it's like a bigger and bigger percentage of my flight here, the time to get here." She said, so that's kind of what's happening. You've got the planes that can't pull up yet, and the passengers aren't being unloaded out there. They're waiting while the next plane, but the other planes are taken care of, so don't tell her I mentioned her name.
Well, thank you. I appreciate today, and any questions or follow-up, feel free. You all have my email. If you have any additional questions, we greatly appreciate you taking the time to hear more information today. But I do want you all, I greatly appreciate all the concern that we see today, especially about the trees. Hopefully we've answered that there's not a project, and we want the best for those trees. So I want everybody to go away knowing that we want the best for those. We don't want to see that impacted because it's a treasure to us. But also at the bottom line is we can pay our bonds. We can pay it. And so we're in strong financial shape. And so all the work that you've done to ensure the safeguards are in place for the county, we applaud you for that. We greatly appreciate that. It'll only make it a better project, but we can pay the bonds. So I just want to make sure everybody goes away. When you look at infrastructure with airports, water, sewer, I've learned a lot about water, sewer with bonds from Pat, but this is the investment in the community, and it makes the economic benefit of us grow. and continue to grow together as partners. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll see you soon, I'm sure. Okay, we're going to go on now to 5B. Maxwell, where are you, buddy?
Chair?
Yes,
can
ma'am.
We discuss the agenda a little bit because to me, there's way too much on the agenda that we can get to in a reasonable
I agree.
amount of time. So can we look at pushing some of these things to another?
Before Maxwell's speech, would you like to postpone something to a later study session?
Because these are all important, but what has to happen, I mean, I guess the fee schedule, we need to have that as a hearing, kind of.
Well, we can't, yes. So
And then-
my recommendation is that we can move 5D, because those are going to be things that we're going to discuss when we vote up on the airport bond issue, that we can move that to that meeting ahead of that, if that so pleases the board.
Yeah.
Just as an FYI, I think Mr. Leahy's item will take about 2 minutes. We just want to talk about the fees associated with the new septic ordinance.
We could still move that if that's a concern, and I'm okay with that.
Keeping D?
No, we're going to move D to the next meeting.
Can we just see what?
Or, I'm sorry, C, we're keeping C, right?
Correct.
I'm sorry, I stepped on you,
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Andrews. Can we just see where we are after C and then
Sure.
decide whether to hold off on because the community survey information is really fascinating, and that might take some time.
Are you okay with that, Commissioner Walter?
Yeah, it's just, D, there wasn't any information to review, and those are really important items, and I need to leave by 12, so.
You want a motion?
Let's make it. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we do 5C as the last item to our agenda and move 5B and D to a future meeting.
I'll support.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Nelson, supported by Commissioner Henschel, where we're going to move on to 5C and 5B, and 5D will be moved to a future meeting. Any discussion?
I just want to clarify procedurally, we do have a board rule that says we don't take action on items at a study session. What we're doing right here is procedural. It's not voting on county business. We're just
That is a good
voting on a
clarification.
procedure.
Thank you for clarifying the differences there, Commissioner Henschel. I appreciate
The
that.
only other thing I'd add is that it would be nice to have more information on those item D pieces to review before our next meeting. There's nothing attached.
I concur, and I can make sure that that happens for you. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. No further discussion, I see. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. You're off the hook today, I guess. Man. Next meeting. Mr. Leahy.
We don't love you.
We'll realize we'll be wide awake then, Maxwell, and you'll have our full attention.
Good morning. I was going to put some slides together, but
That's right.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't put my slides together. Mike Leahy, Health Department. I'm here to just put in front of you the request at the local health department to consider the fee schedule for 2026 in the budget. After working with administrator and our finance director on submitting those fee schedules, we had conversation about all fee schedules across our entire county space, potentially being pushed for future conversation beyond this 2026 budget. So I do hate exceptions to rules, but I was asking if we may be considered as one. A number of things factored into that. Really the baseline at the department, procedurally, we review our fees every 24 months in environmental health. We started that practice going back to about 2018. And that was to always make sure we're aligned with our peers in the region. And back in the 2018 time, we kind of saw that we were lagging behind in some of the fees. On the community health side, we We tend to that less just because some others tend to those fee schedules for us, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, or the insurance companies. So we're really here just discussing the environmental health fees. With all of our grants at the health department, there are requirements in which we spend our fees prior to the utilization of grant dollars. So it's fees in, fees out. That was implemented before my time with MDHHS, just to make sure local health departments weren't accumulating kind of a fund balance based off grant dollars. A lot of our grant dollars, if you don't spend them, they do go back to the state health department. So that's kind of the baseline as to why I'm here, but there were two anomalies as well for the 26 budget. First was the on-site wastewater regulation that is taking effect January 1st of 26. There are no fees built into our current fee schedule for that program. So an updated fee schedule, which was attached in the agenda, is included to address that effective Jan 1, 26. The second was in a coming study session, we will have a public hearing for the repealing of County Ordinance number 3, that's the body art regulation. Due to the state rules that were updated, our ordinance is no longer sufficient. So we are in the procedural process of repealing that ordinance, and if done, we will have to adjust our fees to accommodate that for January 1, 2026. So two kind of anomalies to consider. So I just wanted to put that in front of this board here as consideration for one department to potentially update the 2026 fee schedule in this budget process.
A question for you. This might push you over 2 minutes.
Uh-oh.
But you're doing a good job. So you have your proposed 2026 fee schedule here for the public and our benefit for the next meeting when we're going to vote on this. Can you have the current fee schedule and
Absolutely.
the changes
Yep.
kind of highlighted for
For
us?
sure. Yep, we have that.
Because I don't live in this world, and I'm familiar personally with a couple of these, but otherwise I don't know what you're changing. So
Yep.
can you just give that to us too in advance of the next one?
That can be included.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And if you could, like maybe neighboring counties, so we can get context.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah, we have all of that. We looked at Health Department Northwest, Benzie, Otsego, and yes.
Great, thanks.
I have a quick question. So going on to on the fee schedule there, what's alternative treatment system?
That's an advanced system for on-site wastewater. So an ATS system is when the soils on a piece of property may not be sufficient for your traditional on-site wastewater system. ATS systems are an option in Grand Traverse County, whether that's building an elevated mound system to support the placement of a on-site wastewater system on a piece of property. A little unique to Grand Traverse County, some of our neighboring counties don't provide that option to homeowners. It is an engineered system, so completely different process for applying for those permits and installing those.
Thank you.
Quick clarification question. On the commercial septic permits, it says new construction up to 1,000 gallons per day. Just help me understand the terminology. Is there a cutoff that's considered residential or multifamily?
Ooh.
Because up to could be, right, 500, or it could be, you know what I mean? Like it is very inclusive. And then
Yeah.
what if you're over that amount? What do you qualify as?
Good, this is testing me. At up to 1,000, now you start to incorporate Eagle into the regulation of that on-site sewage and the disposal. So above and beyond that is stepping outside our regulatory authority. We do inspect and work alongside the state health department in those, much like many of our other programs, but that's also language that is being discussed at a state level in terms of how the state would like to see these systems regulated moving forward. So,
Any more questions or
It's like
comments?
5 minutes. Like total Way over the estimate.
But it was our fault, not his.
Yeah, 3 minutes are all on us. So, well, if there's no more comments or questions or concerns, thank you, Director Leahy, for being
Thank
here
you very
today
much.
and explaining that to us. All right, so we're going to go with a second public comment.
Good morning. Bruce Moore in East Bay Township. I am in Commissioner Henschel's district. After listening to the airport bond issue, I have several different comments. First is that you don't have a plan for your own borrowing needs. At this point, you have a very firm estimate of what the Project Alpha is going to cost. You have some business and planning estimates for a jail and a couple of different scenarios for this rehab of this facility and or construction of some new facilities. What you don't have are the borrowing requirements for parks over the next 30 years. You don't have requirements for things that the road commission might need to come to you. You don't have requirements for public works, which I think is ultimately probably going to be some fairly significant borrowing. So there are a lot of different kinds of borrowing estimates that you don't have in front of you. You also recently had a special assessment district for borrowing requirements for some residential streets. That's a ticking time bomb, and I think that you should have some estimate of what those borrowing costs are going to be over the next 30 years, because there are a lot of subdivisions that are now reaching a point where their residential roads will need to be replaced. In most cases, those are handled by townships, but they may wish to make use of the lowering borrowing costs that the county has. So the real issue with the airport bonds is that you don't understand what your own bonding needs are for the time frame of the airport bonds. The second point that I'd like to make, a couple of people refer to this as low risk or risk-free. The bond market prices risk. The bond market, by the airport's own estimates, is pricing the risk at about $600,000 a year of the difference between their bond rating and your bond rating. I personally do not consider $600,000 a year of additional risk to be either risk-free or low risk. So there is a price to that risk. Finally, I'd like to talk briefly about the airport capacity. If you have read the consultant study that they did, I believe in 2021 or 2022.
Finish up.
The consultant suggested that the airport authority not refer to annual capacity when discussing their capacity needs. The airport has demonstrated the ability to do 800,000 per year, but if you took the peak month in August and spread that month across the entire year, they could actually double their existing capacity just by using the other months of the year. I have not seen the highest day figure, but I suspect that if you were to take the highest day in August and run that for every day of the year, you would probably be able to increase the capacity by 4 times. The study that the airport commissioned envisions building a facility that can be closed in the winter. This facility is being built to support tourism traffic. Everything that's discussed about local travel is really a sideshow. This is about tourism traffic. If the tourism drops off, there are significant financial issues that they would encounter. I take issue with the fact that the financing plan for this is based upon parking, which is a cost that is borne by local residents and not by tourists. Thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me to extend my time.
Thank you for your words. Your Eminence, there's no objections from anybody. I'm going to say we're adjourned. Thank you, people. I appreciate your time.
I take umbrage with calling him your